We brought on people who Carlos has done business with. We kind of just have connections with to share their stories, right? To kind of share kind of like the raw behind the scenes look of what their view on success is and how they got there, how they leveled themselves up and personally and in their work. And then sprinkled in between those interviews, you and I had made it a point to have some dialogue about things that are important to us and kind of what has allowed us to experience success in different areas. I think we've talked a little bit about Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, some of those principles, which will continue into season 4 that we'll be recording pretty soon. Just some of those key, those critical principles that we just practice in everyday life and that we carry into our business. Welcome back to Always Level Up. Today, we are doing a recap, kind of just tying up all the loose ends, giving you guys the high-level highlights of Season 3. Can you believe it? Season 3, we're wrapping it up. I think we had a total of 4 or 5 guests.
Yeah, 5. Yeah, we have 5 guests. This last, I think we had a little bit more than that to begin with, but we skipped a couple months. But
What's that?
Guests. I think we had a few more. But as of lately, it was 5 guests, and all with, compelling stories and, inspiration, and, how they were able to navigate through the ups and downs of, the challenges of their businesses and working to grow and level up. So.
Yeah, so we brought on people who Carlos has done business with. We kind of just have connections with to share their stories, right? To kind of share kind of like the raw behind the scenes look of what kind of their view on success is and how they got there, how they leveled themselves up and personally and in their work. And then sprinkled in between those, those interviews, you and I had made it a point to have some dialogue about things that are important to us and kind of what has allowed us to experience success in different areas. I think we've talked a little bit about Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, some of those principles, which will continue into season 4 that we'll be recording pretty soon. So just some of those key, those critical principles that we just practice in everyday life and that we carry into our business. But, we just talked to our podcast manager, and he said those dialogues between you and I actually do really well. So we're thinking about doing more of those. If you guys have any topics that, you want to hear about, you want us to kind of do a little behind the scenes, peel back the curtains of how Carlos and I kind of navigate work life, life, family life, all those things, like share that with us in the comments, and we'll be happy to kind of incorporate those into season 4. Or if you are somebody who is excited to share your story, who wants to come on and have some candid conversations with Carlos and I about your, rise and your, your ideas of success and how you've leveled up yourself and your business, send us an email, hit us up, DM, Instagram, however you can get in touch with us. We'd love to, see if you're a great fit and have you on. But again, this season, packed with stories, real stories, some lessons, a lot of practical insights. And we kind of want to just share some of those with you guys so that you can go back, check out any of those long form content on our YouTube channel that you might have missed. We kind of share a little bit of shorts on Instagram, but you can catch the full episodes on Always Level Up, the podcast on YouTube. So, if you've missed any of those episodes, go ahead and check it out there. And we are just happy to have you guys here and join us.
That's right. As we selected these individuals to interview, a lot of things that stood out to me with each and one of them is, they're ordinary people, and they have goals, they have dreams, they have aspirations to become somebody greater than they were when they were, when they first started on their path of their career, and they all share similar kind of, I wouldn't say backgrounds, but more just like situations where you deal with adversity, you go through it, there's learning involved, and there's a lot of different components to becoming successful. And one path is not better than the other. It's just like you finding your path that's going to be good for you and what you want to accomplish and who you want to become in whatever industry that you're in. Mm-hmm. So success is not limited just to people that are in real estate, or whatever, field you choose. There's different levels to it. And, I think being able to look into these stories and see, how can I relate to this person and how can I use some of these stories to help me overcome whatever it is that I'm dealing with. Because, to get on the path of success, it always starts with adversity. It always starts with challenges. I don't remember a time when I was trying to find my way, like things were perfect. Mm-hmm. I was like, things were not perfect. Things were hard and not going my way, and I needed to figure some things out ASAP, right?
I mean, and how helpful is it when you can learn from someone else's experience and apply, some of their struggles and what they went through mm-hmm. to your own situation, so you don't have to go through those things. You will have to go through some sort of struggle, but you do it with a little bit of knowledge and then a little bit of hope. Right? Yes, a lot of hope.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
But the stories, like you said, they're super relatable. The guests that we have on here are, again, your everyday people who made a life for themselves, who've kind of pulled themselves up at some point, and they all have a strong character of just resilience. Of being able to push through, starting with Uncle Charles, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an episode that maybe we just didn't push as much or just in the timeline because there's a lot of gems in that episode that I think, not just in real estate, but the average person or, even somebody who's just been through the struggle.
Right.
Hearing just the setbacks that he's experienced. I mean, getting down to his last dollar, losing millions, and then just building it back up, right. Through his own resilience. And my favorite thing, the support of his wife that he talked about in the episode. You guys go and check that out. But Uncle Charles, he's a master in the creative finance space, but just had so many walls to overcome to get there.
Yeah. I think back to that conversation we had is, and there's a lot of similarities that I can relate to, especially with, the legal troubles and the incarceration, and just knowing like when you're at that state and that level, you kind of feel hopeless, mm-hmm. And you're like, man, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to find a way? Everybody, it's common to hear that, when you have a criminal record that, your life's over and there's no more opportunities for you, which is a big myth. It's a lie. And it just means you have to work harder. Mm-hmm. You have to work harder. And one thing that I admire what Uncle Charles was able to do was to lean towards education.
Yeah.
And getting his degrees and focusing on growing his knowledge and becoming more valuable in that regard. And just taking that leap of faith and going after entrepreneurship and building up his companies, that he was able to, build, and, he went to the top, and then, life happens, and mm-hmm. And the environment changes, and, business is not as good as it was, and, he pivot and made an adjustment, and it's continued to move forward. And those things are very challenging to do, but it takes a very gritty type of personality to pull yourself back up, get back on your feet, and move forward. A lot of people quit, and there was no quit in this man's blood. I mean, he's a fighter. He will work his butt off, outwork anybody to do what he has to do to take care of his family, and that was one of the things that I admire a lot about him. And it's you don't when you see people like this and you look at them, you don't really know what they've been through.
Yeah.
You might see them for whoever they are today, but you don't know what that road looked like. But when you start to understand it, you can find the wisdom in the knowledge that they share and use that, to your advantage and help you along the way. So, some great gems.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite takeaways too from that episode and was how he shared, you talked about how he did lean into education and how that was a huge milestone for him and his growth. But, he even talked about in the episode, he's like, no, I don't use everything that I learned in college. It wasn't about that. It was really about being a learned person and the ability to use your mind and to think and to think outside of, people having to tell you what to do.
Right. He's a critical thinker.
Right. And so that in itself has gotten him so far. Do you want to share what the name of his company is? And I know we call him Uncle Charles, but
so Charles Hernandez, HBHS, Home Buying, Home Selling Solutions, is his company, and he's also he's creating some pretty sophisticated AI technology right now, which is his pivot, and real estate related, but definitely a niche that not many people are tapping into, which I feel like is going to be a great product that he's going to put out to the market here soon. But yeah, the guy who's wealth of knowledge and again, somebody that's just going all in and betting on himself.
That's right. So go check out that episode. Charles Hernandez, HB, Home Buying, Home Selling. Yeah, right.
That's right.
HBHS.
That's right.
We call him Uncle Charles. He's got some great things, exciting things coming out.
That's the OG.
Go give him a follow. Who else did we have on?
So we had Scott. We had my guy Scott Maloof.
Yes. Scott came in here looking sharp with the matching suit and the hat, always accessorized to the T.
Yeah, he's got his brand on point. Maloof International Group at KW. One thing about Scott, I mean, that I took away, and it's really something that we have. Is keeping strong faith, and keep staying rooted in God and that relationship there, to help navigate through life and life's challenges altogether. Because it's not, life isn't just a smooth path, right? Mm-hmm. It's not easy. There's going to be things that are going to come up, and there's going to be challenges. But when you can lean on that higher power, right? And you can have that faith and know that God's going to make a way, and you may not know exactly what it looks like, but you're going to put in the work, you're going to do whatever it takes, and you're going to learn what you need to learn to grow. Then the doors start to open, and
I think that's what I really admired about Scott. I feel like I've always known him in the background, right? He was the party guy. He's always the guy that threw the best the must be there events in San Antonio.
Right. Yep.
And so kind of knew him from then and in our younger years, but I really admired how I know a few of the women on his team and how strong in their faith they are, and even Crystal Cox goes and does some Bible study there. Mm-hmm. She's at CBC, and they've got a lot of core values that I admire in a business. And he talked a lot about some of those values and what he looks for when he's hiring and growing his team. And so that was a part of him that I didn't really know about, but I kind of was connecting the dots in the background. But after hearing his episode, I really saw how important his faith and his family was to getting him to where he is now. And I think one of the interesting points that he made on the episode was how building a culture, right? Creating a culture that's lasting beyond himself, right? He talked about that team environment and being able to where it's not just about him. He's very selfless in how he does business and how he builds his teams.
Yeah, he has a high level of accountability within the teams as well, and I think that's part of building a winning culture and a winning team, and that's something that he's done with his organization, and to the team where he has the top team in Keller Williams, and that goes to show not only is it the culture that has helped him get to that level, but it's also the values and it's also the learning, right? I always go back to learning because, we can't lean on what we think we know. There's always going to be answers to how to improve and do things better. And I think that's something that he has continuously stayed rooted in is the habit of acquiring new knowledge to help him, level up in his field and it shows, I think the one of the things that also stood out to me was facing adversity. When he was facing adversity, the market shifts, things aren't going as good as they were, production comes down. He's like, man, I have to stop the bleeding. Like, we got the expenses, we got to make adjustments and, but he's aware and instead of just thinking it's going to just all be okay, he has to take the next necessary steps to make the adjustments, realign, and get back on track. And then, boom, he's back to growth and making things happen again. So, those things really stood out in terms of his resilience and again, his ability to adapt in any type of environment.
Yeah, I think him being able to see the business beyond himself, excuse me, not just leveraging other people's strengths, but also understanding that it's more than him, right? He talked about leaving a legacy and a legacy being not just what you leave behind, but what is within you, right? And he shared a little about his, I think the passing of his mom or grandmother or grandfather, and how, just being able to do something outside of himself, do beyond himself. And it wasn't about him. And it wasn't about, the big parties that he throws and who's there, or how many deals that he can sell himself, but what is he actually creating and how is he making the people that come on and build the teams with him better, and how is he helping them grow their faith and it can get real rooted in that faith. He does things for single mothers, things like that. So he does have a very servant heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that has a lot to do with what allows him to experience the amount of success that he has. Because again, it's beyond anything selfish, right?
Right.
He's extremely humble and great character.
Absolutely, I agree. Who else do we have? We had Sandra Rangel.
Yes,
another top performing realtor in San Antonio. One of the best in the business. And think about Sandra. She's such a caring person and just always willing to help.
Yeah, no, I love Sandra. We've worked with her personally. She's helped with our personal assets, helping us sell a couple of our homes. She's always there to kind of just give advice. She's great at what she does. And one of the things that stood out in her interview was, not just her willingness to learn and try new things, especially the social media stuff that she's really stepped into and embraced, and is just wanting to, do it and do it right. But she was never above anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Even being the number one realtor, she was always looking to see how else she could be better or what else she could do. She was ready to go along and be an assistant and go along for the ride just so she can have an opportunity to learn and to incorporate whatever she learned into how to make her business better and how to grow herself and her business. So,
there's no ego. I mean, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And it's always Hey, what can I do to be better, and how can I improve, and how can I help and serve my clients to the best of my ability, to do what's good for them, you know, and in return, it's led to more referrals, repeat business, and just a lot of loyal relationships that she's been able to cultivate. And, you know, one of the things that really stood out to me was, you know, she never wanted to be number one. You know, she never strived to be the best.
Yeah.
But what she did strive to do was to outperform herself.
Yeah.
Let me just be better than I was last year, and I'm moving in the right direction. If I can do more transactions, if I can help more people, then I'm growing, right? And over her tenure in real estate, like, it just started to compound and get better and better and better. Before she, you know, she's the top realtor in the city.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh wow, I didn't even know.
How did I get here? But it is. It's just the power of that growth mindset, right? And again, it's a humble spirit, no ego, to the point where she's like, okay, if this is going to help me grow, you know, if, you know, going in, recording, you know, a silly reel or whatever it is, or whatever's trending, I'm going to go try it and I'm going to see if it works. I'm going to apply it. And she's not afraid to like look silly or fall on her face, or I remember she was telling me a story, and I don't remember if this was on the podcast or if this was just at an event that I went to of hers or something, but she was talking about how the younger agents were, you know, they were going to go record content or create content at a house. And she was like, I'm going to come with you guys. You know, they're thinking as she's the broker, she doesn't have time for us to come hang out with us. And she's like, no, I'm going with you guys. I'm going to get on this content wagon and see what I can do, you know? And so it's one of the things I really love about her. She's just a hard worker all around. You know, she's focused, she's organized. She just has these fundamental qualities about her that she stays consistent with, that allows her to be a front runner. And that's something that, especially up and coming agents, and she's definitely someone to learn from. So, you know, check that episode out. She went from a corporate leader to a real estate broker leader in this space. And so, you know, she has a lot to teach.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we had, you know, my man, Rob Melvin, my
Robert
brother
Melvin.
Right there, you know, former candidate for mayor.
Yeah, he gave it a good run. He put himself out there, which is definitely not something that everyone's willing to do. But he had a different agenda, right? He said, he's like, I'm not a career politician. That's not what but he had a voice.
Right.
And he had some concerns that he wanted to bring forward with solutions. You know, one of the things that he often talked about is just that public-private partnership that we're missing out on. And he was really looking to blur the lines of all these boundaries that we create within ourselves, within the community of like West Side, East Side, South Side, whatever side it is, and everyone's just like looking for their sides. But how do we form just some harmony and
Some
have
unity.
a united front?
I you know, I admire his courage, you know, and his willingness to step outside and do something different, you know, and you know, from you know, he's you know, he went to law school. He has a, you know, education in his background as well. But he's also like, you know, when he made a transition into investing in real estate, you know, those gets a little bit riskier, right? And his willingness to go and create something that nobody was really creating. And I remember when, you know, he built the container homes, you know, and they were just a huge success for his development and the beginning of his development career and as a developer. And then he built, you know, the legacy lofts and, you know, those things. I mean, they had its challenges, but he was able to persevere and see the project through to completion. And even though it didn't shake out exactly how he planned, I mean, he finished the job. And you know, those things are not easy to do, you know, and people, they underestimate, you know, the amount of planning, but also not just the planning, but the the amount of resilience that you have to push through when things change, prices change, and the costs go up, and your project is not, the numbers aren't shaking out the way they were supposed to shake out to, and being able to pivot and make things happen. I think that's really admirable, and to get back up on your feet and keep going.
Yeah, and I really love that because it was apparent in the interview that we had with Rob, but all of our guests, it was this story of finishing what you start, right? Being able to see things through to completion, which unfortunately is a weakness for many of us.
Right.
It's a huge weakness for us. Like once it gets hard, that's when a lot of people throw their hands up. And I think it might have been. Have we talked about Nick yet?
Not yet.
We're getting there.
Yeah, he's.
But he even talked about how right when we're there, we're right at that last
3 feet from gold.
3 feet from gold, right? One last hammer to really make that to create something, make something shatter, and we stop.
Yeah.
And we're right there, and what happens if you just push through when it gets really hard? It's just a common theme, and when people, have a hunger and a desire for something, and they just push through with just grit and everything they have to see it through. Again, there's so much to learn in just that lesson, right? And if we can apply that to once it gets hard, when you feel like you cannot give anymore, take one last swing because you're right there.
Right, and to add to that, the other part of it was, having a spouse that supports you, and that Uncle Charles, mentioned that, and Rob mentions that as well. And I mean, I think it's overlooked how important that relationship with your spouse is, in whenever you're taking on any type of risk, anything outside your comfort zone, and because if you have a spouse that is constantly dropping negativity in your ear, then it's going to make it that much harder to even see something to completion.
Yeah.
To even push through.
To believe in yourself.
To even believe in yourself. It just creates so much doubt. It's almost like your spouse wants you to fail.
Yeah.
In
entrepreneurship, I mean, it's such a key ingredient to have people in your corner. And maybe if you're, in a relationship, you're married, you have a spouse or significant other or not, having people in your corner that are going to lift you up. Absolutely. When you're feeling down, that you can't lift yourself up, you have somebody tapping you on your shoulder or shouting in your ear to get back up. Right? Yeah. There's so much value in having that support, and when it's your wife, all the better. Yeah. And that was a key ingredient, I think, for Robert to take on this new territory that he was embarking on with a mayoral run, and all the effort and time and that takes. Not only that, you're becoming vulnerable to everyone now. Nothing's off. Yeah, you're putting yourself out there. Now people are digging into your background and seeing what does your wife do? What do your kids do? They're looking for things. And, Robert talked about his faith, and he talked about, his own perseverance, really being able to reframe his mind when things weren't looking favorable, and how that impacted him. He shared the stories that, you guys had a super strong kind of, not necessarily a mentor relationship, but you guys had a good relationship where you were
very
able
supportive, just a brother helping a brother, right? And that's what it's about, and I feel as we move and we work with people and we build these relationships up, we have to share things that can lift people's spirits in times of adversity, and we have to help them, look at the bright side, right? Hey, what's going good? How can we focus on something that's positive so we can push through and get to the other side? no matter how dark it looks at the moment,
Yeah.
and I think that's very important. Whether, again, if it comes, like you said, it comes from your wife, it comes from a friend, people that support you, that's super, super important to have, because without it, yeah, you can say like I'm self-made or whatever, but you're really not, because at the end of the day, somebody always has somebody. People that are successful, they always have somebody there that is that, whether it's that prayer warrior or that somebody that's just like constant words of encouragement along the way. It's necessary for to keep moving down the path of whatever it is that you're working towards.
Yeah, and I'm excited for him to kind of get past this chapter and walk into this new chapter with some momentum behind him, with just new ideas.
A whole lot of experience.
A lot of experience. And, if you're someone who is interested in San Antonio as a community, how to develop it, the business impact that it has on it, somebody like Rob is definitely someone you want to follow, share, create dialogue with, because he's got great connections, he's got great ideas, and he really is somebody who bridges the gap, right? He knows it's not all from him, but he knows the right players, and he likes to he's someone that's really good at bringing those key players to the table and creating dialogue around a solution. So
and he takes action. Like he ain't gonna wait. He's like, all right, we're committed, we're doing it, let's go.
Yeah. So that's definitely an episode you want to check out. It's not all about the mayoral run, but it is a lot about his own hustle, his own hope, his hope for San Antonio, and how he sees it. So go ahead and check that episode out as well. So far we talked about Sandra Rangel, her faith and her hustle, Scott Maloof's empire that he's looking to build, and the legacy that he's wanting to leave behind. We've got Uncle Charles. Just that adversity, education, what he's looking to do next with AI and this new technology in the real estate space. And I think our final...
We had Nick Disney.
Nick Disney.
I mean, man, one of my favorite investors in San Antonio. Like, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, he is a great character. I laughed a lot on that episode. He he really kept it real. And so... his story he talks about the imperfect action. He talks about, reading the books and then thinking that he was going to get there and then didn't quite turn out that way, but still having the wherewithal to continue to push through and to see things to the finish line.
Yeah, and he, when he started, he leaned on the books. And, he's looking to do his first flip, and he's like, all right, well, let me buy a house and, let me work on it. Right. So he's wearing all the hats on his first project, and, he makes enough money just to reinvest it into his project. And, just the amount of work ethic he has to really have a vision and then go and make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, again, another person without he might have had some fear, but he was like, you know what, I have the courage too. Like, I'm going to go and do whatever it takes to become successful. And because that's what he wanted for himself and his family. And, as he's finding his way to achieve his goals and building wealth through real estate, he learned some things, right? He's like, okay, well, let me get to 10 rentals. I got to 10 rentals. I'm not as rich as I thought I was going to be, right? Thought money was going to be falling from the sky. And he realized, okay, well, there's still more to it, right? Okay, yes, he has the assets now, but how is he going to continue to build on that, right? Which led him to creating notes, right? And he did some wholesaling too. So, he's really good at marketing and lead generating. And those are the things that, he was able to expose along his journey of building his rental portfolio, and gave him opportunities to make additional income and really build something that's going to last. I
think even if you aren't a real estate person, right? Nick, he talked about having his W-2 job for as long as he could while he built this kind of real estate side hustle that began to outperform his W-2 job. And then he was able to kind of let the W-2 job go. But he encourages you, there are so many ways to make money in real estate. It doesn't have to be this like one size fit all way. But he really shared kind of those core foundational characteristics for someone who can succeed. And that is, like you mentioned, the work ethic, the discipline, but also the delayed gratification, right?
Huge.
It was huge of waiting now to just step into something that will be greater in the future, right? Like, he did the live-in flips, and he knew that if I live in here and I just did the work myself, then it would just, it'd be more cost effective. But there was so much learning in doing that, right? Now you know what the process actually is, how long it could possibly take, and what the numbers are and what things actually cost, right? So there's so much learning that you do along the way when you take a little bit of the hard road, wearing all the hats. It's not easy, but there's so much value in just being able to learn as you go. So he talked about, again, taking that imperfect action, being able to learn and find solutions as you go, because he says you'll never know everything. As much as many books as you read and blogs or mentors that you have, you're never going to know everything. And it really just is about, taking the action to find the clarity to figure it out.
Yeah. And again, he's one he even mentions, right? Like, I got to a point where at one point I was thinking about selling it all. And I'm gonna give up on this, but he said, no, I gotta keep going. And again, that just goes back to, perseverance and making sure that, hey, you know what, I stay the course.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be a time where things get hard.
Yeah.
And that is the test of your faith. And do you really believe, are you really believing that you're going to make it happen? And I think when you continue to chip away, go at it again, eventually it just gives, and things really happen in your favor. So
the quote that I wrote down from his episode was, "You can't fail if you don't quit." Right? As long as you don't quit, you're staying the course and you're staying there. There's no such thing as failure.
Exactly.
So
100%.
Great episode. Very animated guy. He's actually someone who's kind of stepped their content creation game up too. He's got I don't know how many followers now, but didn't start off that way. But is
when Nick and I were running around together doing some deals, I think he had about 300 followers. Now he's got about 50,000. He's outperforming Hank now.
A little friendly competition there. Let's see.
Love those guys.
But I think that did that wrap up our.
Yeah, I mean that's the recap of our guests, and again we're going to continue to bring people on to share their stories and and how they've navigated entrepreneurship and found their success and and the challenges that have come with it. So you can continue to grab different versions from different people and see some of the similarities and some of the differences that may be applicable to you and your situation and whatever you're going through in life right now, to find a way to find success and whatever that looks like for you. And as we had our conversations, we touch on the principles of success, and a lot of this stuff has been important to share because I often talk with friends and ask them about, hey, do you read this book? And they're like, yeah, I read it. And, they've never really been able to share the takeaways. Some do, but not all. But we want to share a lot of the takeaways that we find valuable, that are applicable to life. And if you use these principles and apply them, they're life-changing. They're life-changing. And I think, a lot of times people will give up on life because they feel like the world's just against them. It's just it's not in their cards. But the reality is everybody has an opportunity to do something life changing and put their life on a positive path. No matter how hard it looks, when you just put one foot in front of the other and just start taking steps in a new direction, in a better direction, then it leads to change. But you have to learn new things. Yeah. Right. You have to learn new things.
And I think you and I have been able to not just apply these things as individuals and our own growth path. You shared the book with me, Napoleon Hill, and all his insight and 17 principles, and that's something that I did a deep dive into myself, from my own perspective and my own point of view. And then we were able to have dialogue and figure out how we can bring those principles into our relationship, into our marriage, into how we raise our children. And we're just regular folks from San Antonio, heritage.
Big dreams.
Yeah, right. We, and we just wanted to get better, right? There's nothing special or handed out to us that allowed us to grow in this way, besides our own willingness to learn and grow and apply.
Yeah, and really change, right? Because, how we started, back 20 years ago, and we're definitely not the same people back then, right? And a lot of that just came from learning new ideas, new principles, new information, and then identifying our own weaknesses, internally, right? And speaking for myself, as I was going through the principles of success, I started recognizing, well, I don't do that. That's a weakness. That too, man, I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Right. So, but instead of looking at it as, I need to fix myself all at once, I just said, I need to just work on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And year over year, if I can improve on these characteristics and these habits, then I'll grow and I'll become better. And as my habits get stronger and my self-discipline gets stronger, then I'll be able to apply that discipline to change anything else that I need to change in my life that may be a weakness or something holding me back from getting to that next level, whether it's in my marriage, whether it's as a father, whether it's as a businessman, salesman, whatever it is. I've learned to strive to be better and recognize that, I'm not as good as I think I am. So that really helped me.
In this podcast too, we're putting ourselves out there. We're learning, we're growing, we're figuring out as we go. There's no, we don't have a playbook of what to do and what not to do. We're kind of just in here and we're putting our creative hats on and just creating content and what we feel like that brought us value. If we can share that in a way and it just, can change one person or can impact one person in a positive way, then I think we've done our job. We know that season 4 is coming.
Right.
We're looking to, again, bring on more guests. If you're interested in coming on, please give us a shout out. We'd love to see if you're a great fit for the show. But we're lining up guests across different industries. We've got our brothers coming in for an interview to kick off season 4. Jason and Wes from Soul Fitness.
Yep.
We'll be interviewing them soon, just talking about, their level up story, what they're looking at. I guess also some tips and tricks of fitness and how you can incorporate some of those things, come out to the gym. Those things. We've got the ladies from Girls Gone Wi-Fi, remote workers, entrepreneurs, looking to create community, for women, like-minded women looking to grow their business and connect with people on a different level when you're a lot of times in isolation, when you're working from home and kind of just working from your bed or your dinner table, creating a space for, creative work and connections to happen. But, again, we're all about mindset, talking about money, talking about leadership, any tools that can help you realize your potential, push past your limits, and really level up. So make sure you're following us.
Yes. And, what's really important is for those that haven't found that path in their growth, and to tap in and kind of find your way to a new level, right? Because, I truly believe, I look back at when I was, 18, 19 years old, and I was like, man, if I just had somebody that was just gonna, show me the way, right? I'll do the work, just show me the way, give me some hope, right? And, I looked for that, and it was hard to find. And there were some people that guided me and helped me, you obviously being one of them. But, we want this to be a platform where it creates a path, right? A path for you to go down and see, okay, if all these people can find success, then where do I find mine? And what do I have to do to get there? What do I have to change about myself to get there? What do I have to change about my environment to get there? All these different things. What do I have to learn to get there? And then you start taking one step in front of another.
Yeah. Imperfect action.
Perfect action, and you'll find your way, and ultimately, keeping God in the center of it all really helps navigate through the adversity.
Help me, Jesus.
Amen to that.
So again, if you've got value from any episodes this season, please do us a favor, go back, check out your favorite episodes, leave us a comment, share it with a friend. We want to grow this community as well. We want to be able to reach as many people as possible. And we want, to just bring you guys on for the ride, share as much value as we can. Thanks for rocking with us.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the upcoming season 4. It's going to be live, a lot of good content, and we have some more gems to throw at you guys, so be ready.
Yep. Until then, always level up.
That's right. Catch you on the next one.